All right, welcome everyone to our third and final water webinar. We are really excited to have you all. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm Julia. I'm just here to give you all some housekeeping, go over some housekeeping with you all. Our director, Amy Soner, is going to be sharing some sustainable lawn care advice and be going over all of that today with us. So my first bit of housekeeping is if everybody could mute yourselves for the duration of the webinar, that would be wonderful. If you have trouble figuring it out, I will take care of that as soon as I am done talking. If you do have questions, please direct them to the chat box in the upper right-hand corner. If you see a question on there that somebody else has asked, but you have the same question, feel free to indicate that, and we'll get to that. We'll answer those questions first. We will be allowing about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of the session for questions, and we'll try to get to everybody's. And also, you can change your screen layout to make Amy the focal point if you'd like. In the lower right-hand button, there are three dots down there that you can press. And then finally, just a reminder, this session is being recorded for people who weren't able to make it today, and I'll be sharing it with them later, actually tomorrow. And yeah, I think that's everything. Amy, go on ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm really excited to have all of your letters. You look very engaged, except for Cliff. I can see your face. That's happy to see you. I'm Amy. I'm really excited to be here. This is lawn care is something that we as an organization are very passionate about because there's a lot of things that we can do to continue to have really nice, beautiful places to be and be with our families and our pets and our animals without causing a whole lot of water quality disruption or problems in our local watersheds. So I don't know how many of you have been on, this is a series. This is the final of a series of 3 water quality webinars that we're doing. The first one was on rain gardens and riparian, but the first 2 were on rain gardens and riparian buffers. And those were very successful. And I'm hoping that I can follow in their footsteps as well. So give me a minute and I will be presenting here, sharing my PowerPoint. And I think we're good to go. So again, we are here to talk about lawn care, and all of you, I assume, are here because you are interested in having a lawn that's not full of bugs and weeds and instead a nice lush area. But before I go into that, I always am compelled to tell you a little tiny bit about Bluegrass GreenSource. We're an environmental education organization that serves Central Kentucky. So in front of you should be a map of the 20 counties in Central Kentucky where we focus, and we try and do as much as possible throughout the region. Our office is in Lexington, but we travel consistently around the region there. Our mission is to empower the bluegrass to create a sustainable environment, and we do that by encouraging small changes that make a really big impact in our local environment. We don't do anything in Washington, D.C. or in Frankfurt to affect policy change. Instead, we're really looking at what you can do to affect water quality, energy efficiency, waste reduction, anything that we can do to help our local environment improve. Lawn care is one of those things, and that, like I said, really affects water quality. Lawn care can affect water quality positively and negatively. So hopefully we'll give you some good tips, and by the end of the summer, you'll be lying on your lush lawn, hopefully out of quarantine. So you all are here because you like your lawn. And so I don't need to talk about this in too much depth, but I do want to make sure that we all understand that, you know, lawns are great. I have 9 acres of land, and most of it's trees, but I also have a lawn, and it's very important that I have that lawn. My girls go out and play on it. My dogs go out and use it, you know, things like that. It's just a really nice thing. They also help to cool the air. Anything that's growing is helping with, you know, sort of heat island effect, really absorbing some of that CO2 that we need. Anything that has roots will help reduce erosion. We don't want our land and dirt to go into the Kentucky River or the Licking River and into, you know, the Gulf of Mexico. They so there's just lots of reasons that lawns are really important. They can help reduce water and pollutants into our streams. They help, by creating oxygen. And then sometimes, depending on how deep your grass is and all that, they can even sometimes help with your with the soils over time. And again, they're just nice. You want to go out and be in enjoying nature, go lay on a picnic or something like that. So we all really obviously are here because we want lawns. It's just a matter of how do we do it appropriately. So if we were to think of a truly environmentally friendly lawn, to be honest, we probably wouldn't have a lawn at all. And that's not what we're advocating today. We want to make sure that you understand we all want a lawn. So let's try and figure out a way to make it have the least impact as possible. But a truly environmentally friendly lawn is, you would never fertilize, you would never water, you would not use a lawn mower that it has gas powered or electricity or battery. You would do it as self-propelled mower. But most people are not going to find this necessarily appealing. So some people definitely do, and that's great. But what we're going to talk about today is how do we not have that quite of a stringent environmentally responsible lawn or sustainable lawn, but instead try and do some workarounds and try and do things properly. Because the key is really to find a balance, that you really want to find a balance between having something that you really, really want and then having the least amount of environmental impact while you do that. So when we talk today, there are two main themes you will hear me reiterate over and over again. One is thinking about the timing of things and ultimately having the healthiest lawn possible. It's very important what you do in the spring, summer, fall, less important in the winter. And then also the healthier your lawn is, the less weeds, the less grubs, the less things that you're going to have in there that you don't want. So those are sort of the two main themes that you'll hear me say over and over again while we're talking about how to have a green lawn. So timing. So this is and you'll be getting this recording of this webinar, so you get to see this more clearly. And this comes from Kentucky Extension Service, so you can also look at it through there. But timing is the really, really important part. And I'm not going to go into all of these details now, but know that there is a calendar and know that it's really important to do things at the right time, because if you don't, you're wasting money, you're wasting time, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind as we go through and understanding that different things need to be done at different times. So it's spring, it's late spring now, but let's talk about spring. That's always a good way to start sort of renewal and that kind of thing. And it's when we're all start really thinking about our lawn. We don't care about it in the winter time, but in the springtime, it's something that we want to pay a little bit more attention to. So what do we need to do first off, as soon as we can start getting outside? So it may take you a minute a little bit through spring to start mowing, but this is the time to do low mowing. So if you're mowing something, you want to, if you're mowing your grass, if you're getting those tall bits or rough patches or things like that, and you want to mow your grass, this is an opportunity to mow it low. So, set your blades on your mower to about 2.5, 3 inches tall. Spring and fall, you can do the low mowing. And that's really a little bit better for the lawn at that point. It also, spring, as we know, can be very cold. It can be warm, cold, warm, and that low mowing really allows the sun to get through the blades of grass and into the soil, and really helps that soil warm up and helps the root system grow stronger. It'll improve the density and that kind of thing. Now, if you're not getting out to your lawn as quickly as you want and your grass is high, always make sure you cut it in little snips. You don't want to cut more than a couple inches off at a time. That won't be as healthy for the lawn. It won't keep your lawn as healthy. It'll also create a lot of extra grass clippings that are on top of your lawn, which might cause some brown spots and things like that. So again, spring, if you catch it early enough, just go straight to mowing the grass to about 2.5, 3 inches. But if you wait a little bit, then make sure you lower that. You mow it a couple times until you get to that, about a week in between or so. Fertilizing is not for the spring. What fertilizing does in the spring is it lets all of those weeds, the dandelions and all of that, when they're ripe and ready to just burst through, it gives them all sorts of extra nutrients, and that's not what we want. So fertilizing in the spring is not a good idea. It also can decrease root production because the grass gets that fertilizer and really starts growing. A strong, healthy root system in your grass is going to really help keep your lawn lush and green for in the summer months. And then it can also promote disease on the things that you want, extra fertilizer. So again, fertilizing in the spring is absolutely not what you want to do. That's not the right time for that at all. So what else are we doing in the spring? We're getting excited. We're going out, cleaning up our yard, cleaning up our deck and our outside spaces. It's also time to think about your lawnmower itself. You want your lawnmower's blades to be as sharp as possible. If they're dull, like the picture on the bottom, you can see those big chunks taken out of the bottom part of the blade. If they're dull, it'll tear the grass blades, and the grass blades that are cut in a more clean and clear cut will actually be healthier than if they're ripped and shredded and sort of frayed at the ends. You'll notice this, well, hopefully you'll catch the blades before they start looking ragged when you're mowing your grass, but keep an eye on that, because anytime that the grass is cut in a way that is not a clean cut, it's a lot more susceptible to any diseases and pests and things like that. So again, if we want to keep our lawn really, really healthy, which is the best way to fight against weeds, the best way to fight against insects, make sure that your lawnmower blades are as clean and sharp as possible. And then we should all know this. There's been a lot of campaigns about it, but it is really important to leave your grass clippings on a lawn. There is a lot less need to fertilize if you're using your own compost, essentially, which is the lawn clippings. The lawn clippings themselves become the compost in your soil and really help it, and really help you need a lot less maintenance moving forward. So the only exception would be if for some reason you didn't listen to the slide before and cut way too much of your lawn at one time and had those big giant chunks of grass. Those probably need to be removed for sun and light and that kind of thing. But for the most part, if you're cutting the right amount each time, just leave those long clippings on your ground. Also, for people who are relatively lazy like me, it means you don't have to bag them, you don't have to rake them, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff too. One thing to point out, and I don't have this written in this slide, is never put your lawn clippings in a storm drain. So if you live in an urban area or a suburban area and you're mowing your grass and there's lots of grass that ends up on your sidewalk or in your driveway, sweep those back into the lawn. One, because you're going to get that extra fertilizer that they provide as they decompose. But two, any of that extra fertilizer essentially that ends up in our storm drains then can create algal blooms or things that we don't want in our streams that we have in central Kentucky. Most of all of our storm drains lead directly to a creek. So we don't want to have extra lawn clippings. They don't need the fertilizer. Our lawns need, and our soil there needs the fertilizer. Okay, now one thing to start looking at in spring is whether or not your soil is compacted. In the winter, if you're driving on it, if you're walking on it, if you're playing on it, there is a potential for your soil to become compacted. And again, the best thing we need to have is a healthy lawn. And if our soil is compacted, there's less space for air and water to get into the soil. It really makes whatever plant you have in there struggle and their roots become a lot more shallow. Deep roots in the springtime really help for the summer lawn when it goes dormant. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So how do you know? How do you know if your soil is compacted? There's a fairly easy test. You can see the gentleman's hand up there. Just, can you push a knife into the soil with your thumb? Not with your whole body strength putting it in, but can you just sort of push a knife into it? And if it goes in easily, you're fine. If it doesn't go in easily, spring is the time to aerate the soil. And that's essentially just poking holes in it. You see lots of different options here of ways to do it. Those shoes are my scariest thing. I don't know that I would wear those. I would inevitably get hurt with those shoes. But just a pitchfork, anything that you can do to poke holes throughout your lawn in the areas. And that'll really allow water to get in there. Things like worms are really great at helping to aerate that. So the more that we can keep that soil as healthy as possible, then it'll be more aerated. So a pitchfork, walking around with spikes, whatever it is that you can do to aerate the parts of your lawn, it's important to do that in the spring so that the grass has an opportunity to really grow and the root system gets to be really strong. All right, so we talked about how it's really important to not fertilize in the spring. Yes, so what we really do not want to do is to weed and feed. We don't want to, people think, they get out in their lawn and they say, oh, this is great. I see weeds in my lawn. I really want it to be lush. I'm going to put pesticides on there, and I'm going to put fertilizer on at the same time. But that is not the way that we do it at all. The herbicide is for the spring. So if you have a pre-emergent you wanted to do, where you would sort of get plants that have a broadleaf herbicide, something along those lines, the time to do that is the spring. Fertilizing is for the fall. So a weed and feed packaged product, which are very, very, very popular, is not appropriate because you're supposed to do them at different times of the year. So make sure that you're using any herbicide that you want to use in the spring, and any sort of fertilizer is in the fall. This is lots of more other reasons not to do fertilizer in the spring. So encouraging heavy flush of growth requires more mowing, creates a shallow root system, sort of the things that we talked about. So again, no, weed and feed are a no-no in this thing. All right, so we've gotten through spring, and now we're on to summer. So what is it that we need to do in summer? One of the things to keep in mind is that the grass that we have in Kentucky, and pretty much over the most of the United States, are cool season grasses. This means that the grass is usually tall fescue, and I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, but tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass, and they do really well in cool seasons. So summer, we have to baby our lawn a little bit more, because the lawns that we traditionally have are not fans of heat. They're not fans of drought. And so this is the time that we sort of have to baby it a little bit more. So when we're doing that, we want to think about mowing. Obviously, we're going to be mowing a lot more than we were in the winter or early spring. But we want to make sure that we have our grass a little bit higher. So mowing in the summertime is more of a 3 to 4 inch mow, the grass height, versus a 2.5 to 3 inch in the spring. And this is because it just helps the grass compete with the weeds a little bit better. Here's a statistic here that taller grass prevents 85 to 100% of crabgrass germination. So again, the healthier your lawn is, that the taller the grass, the deeper the root system, the better it's going to be able to prevent weeds from growing up into it. So what about watering in summer? So there is a potential that you might need to water your grass, or it might get really brown if you don't. And so there's sort of two schools of thought on watering. One is called deep and frequent. So this is where people might have sprinkler systems, installed. This is sort of the thing that they would probably want to do. You want to wait. In order to do this, you want to wait until the lawn is dry. One of my huge pet peeves, and there's a neighborhood near my daughter's school that I would drive by all the time, and it would be raining and the sprinklers were on. It just hurt my soul. It was a HOA kind of thing, and it hurt my soul to see that people wasting potable water like that and paying that money to water their lawns when it was raining at the same time. So anyway, don't do that. But wait until your lawn is dry. It's probably pretty easy to tell if your lawn is dry, but essentially if you're walking in it and you can see your footprints, it's probably in need of a drink of water. And then you want to water until you see puddles, just small little puddles. But the idea is that you wanted to water, if you're going to do this, if this is the method that you choose, you want to water so that the water gets really deep and soaks far into the ground. That's going to really help the roots get as deep as possible. If you water just on the surface of your lawn, the roots won't go down and deep and try and get more of the water underneath it. And you want the roots to be deep in order to be able to be resilient. So this is a frequent, every time, not just when it starts turning brown, but this is a once a week or so, if it's not raining a lot, watering situation where you're giving your grass lots and lots of water. Another alternative is to just water as needed. So let me preface this all or state right now is that you don't have, if you don't water your lawn, chances are if we go through an extended period of no rain, not even a drought, but just an extended period of no rain, it'll start getting brown. This is just dormancy. So Kentucky bluegrass will be dormant in hot weather, or it can be. And so this just means that it goes brown. It doesn't mean that it's dead. It just has stopped growing. It's like the trees in the wintertime. They've just sort of taken a step back and said, I'm going to wait until I'm needed again and I have more cool weather and more water. So if you don't water frequently, the deep and frequent method prior that I talked about just now, then you want to just water as needed. And sometimes you don't need to water at all, but if you do, then you can do it. But make sure if you do water as needed, if it gets really, really droughty, make sure you're watering enough. Again, you don't want sort of a light watering. Sometimes people suggest putting a tuna can or like a tuna can in your yard while you're watering, and make sure that tuna can gets filled up. You want at least that much water if you're going to do it in this sort of infrequent time period. There is a benefit to watering. You know, some people just don't do it at all. The benefit to watering in a drought situation, so as needed, when there's really a big drought going on, the benefit is that your lawn will actually become a little bit healthier when the drought is over. So again, a healthy lawn helps prevent the weeds, helps prevent the insects that we don't want, that kind of thing. So if you don't care about your lawn at all and don't water, it'll still come back. You might have more incidence of weeds and things that come back after a long drought period. But if it's something that you're worried about and you really want to keep the weeds at bay, watering deeply in a large drought is still a really good idea. And then again, if you want your lawn to maintain the same look all year round, use the deep and frequent method that I just mentioned. Now, you can do too much water. And you want to make sure that, because if there's too much water, if it's pooling up, and I suggested waiting for the couple puddles, and that's fine. But if you're getting real pools of water, it can really cause problems and really cause soil oxygen levels to be a lot lower, because now there's no space for air. All of the spaces in the soil are taken up by water. It can also cause the root system to be shallow. It's kind of counterintuitive, since we said a deep watering was better, but this just makes all the roots want to come to the surface. And so too much water is really almost as bad as not watering at all to your lawn. So the best practice is really infrequent, but doing it during a drought. That's sort of what I was talking about before, is infrequent watering, but when there's a big drought, water it so that your lawn can remain strong and healthy when we're out of the drought, kind of thing. Another thing, and this is for plants and things too, but what time of day that you water is really important too. Watering in the morning is preferable, because it gives any water that doesn't soak into the ground an opportunity to evaporate. If you do it in the middle of the day in the hot summer, it will evaporate without really benefiting the lawn very much. But if you water in the evening and there's any water left in the soil that sort of puddles up, it may not evaporate, and then you might have mold issues moving forward. So time of day that you water is also very important. Make sure you're doing it in the morning. Watering in the morning is preferable there. So if there is a drought and your lawn is looking a little rough, don't walk on it, or try to avoid walking on it. It depends on how you use your lawn. But this is a sensitive time. So if it's in the summer and there's a drought happening, and even if you're doing the watering and that kind of thing, just be cognizant of your lawn, because the healthier it is, the more that we'll be able to keep the weeds out and that kind of thing. So make sure that you're just nice to your lawn in the summertime if there's a drought. This picture is someone who is not. They're driving all over it, and you can see the problems. The soil is a lot more apt to be compacted, and it just will not be competitive against weeds if you do that. So keep that in mind, and we can baby our lawns in the summer, because that's not their favorite time. I am like a cool season grass. I like spring and fall. Summer is not my favorite either. So, all right, what do we do in fall? Fall is coming up. Well, we haven't done summer yet here, but when we have fall, there's another time to really start thinking about your lawn. So the time to think about your lawn's growth, and not just maintenance, but growth, is in the fall. And so this is an opportunity to look and see, where are the bare spots? Where do I need to do reseeding? Because it takes a while. So fall is the time to do that. You want to look for, if you're buying some grass seed, if you're buying, again, the most common are Kentucky Bluegrass and tall fescue. If you're either one of those, they're both cool season grasses. You want to start seeding them in the late summer or early fall. They really need a chance to get their roots established before they go into that hot summer. And so if you do it in the fall, it really gives their roots and the seeds a chance to really get established and start moving forward. And then therefore there's less competition from crabgrass in the fall than there is in the spring, and that kind of thing. So if you see bare spots right now in your lawn, just wait until fall and really think about it then. Otherwise the roots won't have, and the grass won't have as much of a chance to get established before the droughts come and the hot summer and the things that they don't like. And then weed prevention. So you may not need a chemical herbicide. If you have a healthy lawn through the spring and summer, it should suppress the fall weeds. So if there's that, we talked about that weed and feed, you could potentially do a weed and feed in the fall. But really the best time to do the weed prevention is in the spring. And that's when you can use your broadleaf or your pre-emergent and things like that. So really thinking about the fall as a time to grow the grass. So you're growing in the bare spots, you're growing the grass using fertilizer, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Mowing. Now, again, the grass is happier in the fall and in the spring, so you can get it a little bit shorter. This is another opportunity to do that low mowing. You can go back down to 2.5, 3 inches in your lawn. And actually that will, again, help create a thicker, more dense lawn. It'll reduce some of the diseases that might come in the winter and in the spring by having that dense lawn. Also, it'll make it easier to rake leaves. So this, is something that we don't always think about. But if you're in a situation where you have to rake your leaves and your rake is pulling on long blades of grass, there's more of an opportunity to break that lawn blades off, the blades of grass off in a jagged way, and that again will help get diseases in there and that kind of thing. So the easier it is to rake, the less your chance you're going to have of destroying the blades of grass as it is. And then again, always, you don't want to ever cut off more than 30% of your lawn at a time. That is really shocking to your lawn. So try not to do that. Our lawnmower was broken personally, and we had like a jungle, and so we had to go back through a few times and mow it till we could get it down to the right height, because we didn't want to do it all at once for a variety of reasons. Okay, fertilizing. This is what one of the main sources of pollution are in lawn care. And a lot of times people think of agriculture as being, using too much fertilizer and that kind of thing. But agriculture really has it down to a science. Big giant farms, row crops, they're all spending a huge amount of money on fertilizer, and so they're going to make sure that they're doing it well and they're doing it right. People who have, a 1/4 of an acre lawn, they just dump fertilizer, potentially could be dumping fertilizer on their lawn, just hoping for the best. And, because a bag of fertilizer might cost $20 or $30 a year isn't that bad when you're a farmer, and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on fertilizer, potentially, it's a lot different idea. So fertilizer, when done right, will help your lawn be lush and fabulous. When done wrong, can really cause a lot of problems with our local water quality. And so this is where we spend a little bit of extra time in this kind of presentation to really talk about how best to do fertilizer, and how and why it's important and that kind of thing. I don't have a slide on this, but just to kind of put it in your mind, you may have heard of the zone in the Gulf of Mexico that is devoid of oxygen. There's no oxygen there, and that's because what's happening is fertilizer and nutrients from, whether it could be also pet waste and animal waste and things like that, but nutrients from Kentucky and all over, if the Mississippi watershed, are flowing down into the Mississippi and being deposited in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is why you don't put your lawn clippings down the storm sewer either. But they're causing these big algal blooms, and then as the algae dies, it sort of eats up all of the oxygen. So there's giant areas in the Gulf of Mexico that do not have any fish or anything living in them because of that. And so we don't want to contribute to that. And we also want to make sure that our local water quality doesn't have the same, our local waterways don't have the same effect as well. So using fertilizer correctly is very, very important. So fall, I've mentioned this many times, fall is the best time for nutrients. This is the time that your grass wants it. They just got through a pretty rough summer, and they really want to grow and develop their root system so they can prepare for winter. And so this is the best time to do the fertilizing. It'll also help your winter color. It'll help throughout the winter, not just in when you put the fertilizer on, but it'll help throughout the winter. It'll help it keep it a little bit more green than normal. And then it'll also help you with less frequent spring mowing. You won't have to mow as much, fewer weeds in the summer, less heat stress and water in the summer. And then it'll minimize the chemical inputs throughout the year. So this is a really good time to fertilize. And again, fertilizing in the fall means that you have a healthy lawn. If you look at the picture down at the bottom of the screen, you can see sort of the root system and the height of the grass as well. And so this is a really important, in my opinion, I really like this visual because it shows you how the grass just in the summer sort of gets stressed out and doesn't want anything. But the fall, it's storing up, it's getting ready for winter and that kind of stuff. All right, so there is a very natural fertilizer that exists in Kentucky everywhere, and if you don't mind it, please keep it in your lawn. So it's white clover, and you might have seen, you might have this in your lawn. I personally love the clover, and my girls look for 4-leaf clovers all the time. But clover is a really great way to naturally add nitrogen. Generally, your soils are probably most in need of nitrogen, and so this is a really great way to get that nitrogen from the air into your into your soil and help your lawn throughout, your whole lawn. Clover is called a legume, like beans and things, where it actually can what's called fixed nitrogen, where it takes nitrogen from the air, and then through its process and through its roots, it fixes it and deposits it back into the soil. This is a really great way to provide nitrogen at low cost or no cost. Some people even seed in clover. They'll buy clover seeds and sprinkle it throughout their lawn, so there's clover all over their lawn, because it really is one of the best ways to get nitrogen in there. Clover can supply 2 pounds of nitrogen each year, which is all that the soil really needs, or your lawn really needs. And so this is really a great way to do it. And it's a nice pollinator too. The bees will, don't step on them, but the bees will get to find, they really like those white clover, and it's a nice sort of springtime flower for bees and other pollinators to use as well. If you don't like it, fine, there's other ways to add nitrogen. But if this is something that you're willing to accept in your lawn, this will really help you in general. Okay, so what kind of fertilizer? There's 2 different kinds of fertilizer. There's a synthetic fertilizer and an organic fertilizer. Neither one of them do you want to use to excess. Neither one of them are better. Just because one is organic, one's not, doesn't mean that one's any better. And so they're both sort of essentially going to be polluting the same. Organic is a little bit better though, because it's easier to not over fertilize. Synthetic is generally more concentrated. And so if you are putting it on your lawn, you don't want it to be super concentrated, or you can worry about it being super concentrated and burning your lawn or something like that. The organic also has a time release factor to it as well, so you don't have to worry about doing it as frequently. So if you had to choose, you can use the organic fertilizer first, and it'll, when you go to the store, it'll tell you. Now, the key to fertilizing is you only want to use what's necessary, and so you want to make sure that you don't just go to the store and pick whatever packaging looks best. You really want to understand what your soil needs. What is it that your soil needs? And every county extension office in the state has the ability to do it. And we'll talk about how to do a soil test in just a minute. But a couple other things that you want to understand about fertilizer: you don't want to do it just before a rain. Some fertilizer is water soluble, and so that's important and good, but you don't want to do it just before a big downpour or something like that, because then all of your money that you just put on your lawn is now going to be washed into the local creek, which does not need your fertilizer. And then if you're using a spreader, like the picture there, if you get any, you don't want to, on your sidewalk or your driveway, make sure you sweep it and put it back on your lawn, because it's not helpful to have your sidewalk fertilized. And we just don't want to cause more weeds to grow in your cracks and things like that. So it's really important to read the directions, do the fertilizing properly in order to have that lush green lawn ready for the next year. So a soil test, this is what we really recommend. If fertilizing is something that you want to do and you feel like your lawn could really benefit from that, we really, really recommend a soil test. They are very inexpensive. It's less than, I think it's about $7 at the extension office, and they can usually get your test done fairly quickly. The information for Fayette County's extension office is there at the bottom, but all of your counties, if you're not in Fayette County, they all can have, they will all do a soil test. Now, how do you get the soil for it? The idea is that you want to look around your yard and get a sampling from your whole yard, not just one little area, because you're not going to be fertilizing just one little area. You're going to be fertilizing your whole lawn, or the parts of it that you want. So you need to get a bucket and a shovel or a trowel, something. There are special soil probes and all sorts of things like that, but chances are you don't have that. So a shovel or a trowel will work just fine. You need about 10 to 15 random spots, and you do it in the fall or in the early spring. So you want to walk around your yard, 10 or 15 random spots, sort of equally dispersed throughout your area, and get a little bit of soil from each one of those. If there's something special in your yard that you would spend differently, you would think about differently, like a flower bed or a vegetable bed, you want to do the same idea, but on its own. You would do multiple tests in this case, because you don't, what your flower bed needs or what your vegetable bed needs is going to be potentially different than what your regular lawn needs. So if you're doing this 2 times, feel free to do it multiple times with different areas, but you still want to get a random sampling of dirt. If you're using a shovel or a trowel and you don't want giant pits in your lawn, which I don't blame you, you can sort of pull back the top layer of lawn, get a little bit of the soil underneath and put it in a bucket. Once you have your soil from the 10 to 15 spots, you put all of that into a bucket or a container and then stir it up so it's all mixed in, and then take a little bit and put it into a baggie. The extension offices have special bags that you can use, but there's no need to go twice. So you just have to, you can just use a Ziploc bag or something like that and put it in there. You don't need to give them all of the soil, but you do want to get the soil, mix it up, and then just choose, after it's been mixed up, choose a little bit and put it in the bag. The county extension office will test for the pH, which is how much acidity is in the soil, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. So those are the things. Now, the normal things that you'll be fertilizing for are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But it will give you sort of a large scale of how the other things are in your lawn. The pH is really important if you want to grow something like azaleas or rhododendrons that need a more acidic soil, that kind of thing. The lawn, it's not as important for that. All right, so this is geometry, which I had forgotten. I am helping my 7th grader with math occasionally, and I'm relearning all of these things again, which is kind of fun. But you want to understand how much lawn you are actually needing to fertilize. That's really important when you're putting it on, because again, we don't want to do too much. We don't want to waste the fertilizer. So so in the example on the right, the sort of grayish, brownish, tannish square, inside that square, there's a flower bed, there's a house, there's a deck, there's a driveway. So, you can understand the perimeter of the whole yard, but you also have to subtract what is with the amenities that are in the lawn. So you would find out the perimeter, the area of the square, but then subtract the area of the oval and the rectangle and the squares and that kind of thing to get how much area you have. And then how do you know what to buy? So buying fertilizer is very important. In Central Kentucky, in lots and lots of places throughout the United States, there is not a giant need for phosphorus. And the University of Kentucky did a study recently where they did random samples in all of Central Kentucky. It may have been broader than that. And they found that almost none of the samples that they took over a few month period needed phosphorus at all. So a good sort of standard is just to make sure there's no phosphorus in your fertilizer. Phosphorus can cause we have tons of phosphorus from our limestone. We just have a lot of it sort of inherently here in our lawns and our soil. So when you're looking for fertilizer, make sure to think about a fertilizer that does not have phosphorus, because it's not necessary and it can cause a lot of water quality problems. So how do you know there's no phosphorus? Learning how to read the bag is important. All fertilizer bags will have 3 numbers on it, separated by dashes. The order of those numbers is nitrogen is the first number, phosphorus is the second number, and potassium or potash is the third number. Make sure that you're getting a product with 0 phosphorus, that the center number is 0. Now, if your soil test comes back and says you need phosphorus, then you should go play the lottery, because very few do. But this is, and then you can adjust. But for the vast majority of us, we are not going to need phosphorus at all. But your soil test will tell you how much nitrogen you need. And the numbers are in a percent. So it's 32% available nitrogen, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind when you're reading your soil test and you're looking at your fertilizer. Keep that in mind. If you see something called a complete fertilizer, stay clear of it, because it usually means that it just has 10% of all of them, or like a 10-10-10 or a 10-20-10. Again, you want that center number, that middle number, to be 0. So keep that in mind when you're looking for fertilizers. How many pounds per 1,000 square feet? So if you find that your yard is 1,000 square feet, then if you have Kentucky Bluegrass, you want to put about 2 to 4 pounds in the autumn on that. Generally, none of you probably have Bermuda grass or zoysia grass, so that's not something that unless you planted that specifically. Sort of the normal is either tall fescue or Kentucky Bluegrass. But here's a little chart with how much pounds per square foot per year that you want to put on your grass, always in the fall, assuming you have the normal grasses. And then calibrate. So if you have a spreader, whether it's a handheld spreader or a rolling spreader like this one, make sure you're calibrating. More is not better in any way. Make sure that you're paying attention to your soil test that you get. Make sure you're paying attention to how many pounds per square foot, and make sure you're paying attention to how broadly the spreader is spreading. So in the picture on the left, on the bottom left, if you're spreading really broadly, that means less passes with your spreader, which is a bonus unless you need exercise. But you're also, keep in mind how close you are to the driveways and the impervious surfaces and things like that, because you don't want it to go beyond that. All right, healthy lawns, just a couple little follow-ups here and then we'll be done. If you're planting a new lawn, if you just want to sort of start over, there are no native species of lawn, of the kind of lawn that we're used to. GreenSource is very much a fan of and promotes in any way native species, but this is not one of those options. Native grasses in Kentucky are clump grasses, so they really sort of grow in clumps, and then they have spaces in between each of the clumps, and that is great for wildlife. It's great for the wildlife to escape, and it's what we have. Big blue stem is an example, little blue stem. Those are some examples of some native grasses, but they are not what you want if you want sort of a traditional lawn. So I've said this a few times, but the most common in Kentucky are Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue. And just to reiterate, though it says Kentucky bluegrass, it's not native. It's not a native grass at all. If you are deciding to plant your grass yourself, if you're sort of starting over or have a new house or something like that, our suggestion is that you plant tall fescue because it has a much better heat tolerance and you don't have to water it as often. If you have bluegrass or tall fescue, then whatever it is fine now. But if you were to plant it again, we would recommend tall fescue for those two reasons. Okay, bugs. Here's just a couple other tips. Bugs. We don't like bugs. I don't want them in my yard that I don't want. So this goes back to the healthy lawn. The healthier your root system, the more that they're not going to have the ability or the space to grow. If you had the larvae and the bugs aren't. If you have a bug system, increase your mower height. Because the higher you mow the grass, the better and deeper the roots will be. So make sure that you're working at it that way. A lot of times the bugs really like wet lawns, especially in June and July. So if you're having bug problems, try to think about that less frequent watering system as opposed to the deep and frequent one. Because you want to keep it dry because they like that moisture. But you may need to water in August and September. Again, the healthy lawn is really what's going to keep these things at bay. So if we're having droughts in August or something, it may be a time that you actually do want to water then, so that make sure that your lawn stays as healthy as possible. Think about what kind of plants are on your property as well. If you have roses or Japanese maples, those are actually plants that can attract the adult form of the larva, and we don't want that. We don't want the adults because then, they procreate and have babies. The babies are often what causes the problems. The grubs will eat the roots of the lawn and things like that. Moles. This is almost an impossible situation. Moles eat earthworms. So a lot of, people say, oh, I'm sprinkling stuff on my grass or whatever to get rid of moles, but it doesn't work. They eat worms, and it's illegal to kill the worms. So it's illegal to sell products that kill the worms. So what you have is moles eating worms. And if you have a healthy lawn, chances are you might have a lot of worms because there's a lot of good soil and aeration and things like that there. You can use a castor oil based repellent. It works for a few weeks, but the best thing is just to trap it and take it far, far away. That's the best thing to do. Moles are a little bit tricky. There's those sonic things that I've heard. I think people just want to pretend that the money they spent on the sonic little thing that they put in their yard was worth it, and so they say it works. But the best thing is just to get them out of there as far as possible. All right, so we talked about how to make your lawn green and lush. There are ways to additionally have sort of a greener space, maybe not the specific lawn part, but anytime we're talking about the reasons for having a green or a sustainable lawn, the reasons ultimately result in water quality. Anytime we can allow water to soak into the ground, the better off we are. Water that runs off of the ground will pick up litter, antifreeze or oil from your car, pet waste, extra fertilizer, all of those things. So anytime water is running off of your lawn, it's carrying with it all of these potential pollutants. And again, it goes directly into our water system, our creeks and our streams. And so any opportunity we have to actually let the water soak in is what we want to do, because the soil can naturally sort of clean it up and help with that water pollution. Ways to do this: one, a lawn is better than impervious surface, so that's good. Sometimes a lawn, if it's compacted, it isn't much better than an impervious surface. It might run off of it anyway. But if you have an opportunity to plant a rain garden, we have the recording of that webinar that we did if you're interested in that. But if you have an opportunity to plant a rain garden, if you have an opportunity to install a rain barrel, both of these things will help the water stay on your property longer and not run off of it. Also, soil erosion. We don't want to lose our dirt, our nice topsoil. So you want to keep that, and water and dirt can also be one of a really big pollutant in our water quality. So there's a fabulous picture of all of the ways that we like using lawns. GreenSource really tries to make sure that you are empowered to do things. And I hope that this is something that has inspired you and empowered you to change things about your lawn care practices and I respect the fact that people want a lawn. Like I said, I have a lawn and it's very important to me. I'm not quite as picky as some people are about lawns. I also don't have any neighbors who yell at me about dandelions. So that's a bonus. But lawns are really important and they're just a great time to spend with your family. Now that I'm home a lot more, we've been spending a lot more time outside when it's not raining, and it's really lovely, and I respect it. And you want something that's nice and soft and on your feet and for your animals and things. All right, Julia, I think that's it. If there are any questions, I am happy to do my best.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amy. I know I learned a lot about lawns today. We only have one question so far, but if anybody thinks of any more, feel free to type it in. One question we've got so far is from Sandra. What are your best tips for creating and maintaining a healthy lawn in well-shaded areas?
That's a lot harder. And one of the things that I didn't say, but that is very true, is if you're having a hard time growing your lawn, plant something different. And I know that that's maybe not the best way to think about it, but shade is really hard. And you can buy seeds, grasses that are supposed to be better and more tolerant for shade. And you can definitely talk to, when you go to the hardware store or wherever it is that you buy your grass seed, you can definitely talk to them. But consider, maybe that's not the best place for a lawn, or maybe it's okay that it's just a little bit of dirt and that kind of thing, because it is really hard for shaded things. Making sure, but you still want tips. So making sure that the soil underneath the tree, which I assume is why it's shaded, is aerated. I think a lot of times we in the summer like the shaded spots, and so we'll go there and sit and all of that. Make sure that there's that you can stick that knife into the lawn below the tree. That's really important. Sometimes mulch, if you just have mulch around your tree instead of the grass itself, that can still be a nice soft place to sit. But make sure that you keep it aerated. You put the right kinds of seed down there, and you can fertilize that in the fall. That's going to get some sun in the winter time, so that might be a little bit helpful. But those are some ideas.
Awesome. We have another question that just came in from Lisa. What is the best time or method to work on filling in holes or depressions in your lawn?
So that would be, I would really think about that a little bit more in the winter time. So if you have a hole or a depression and you have an opportunity to kind of fix it, you don't want to do it in a rainy part, or maybe winter's a little bit late, but when you're seeding the grass, because you want the seed to start to hold the dirt in. So if you're filling a depression with more dirt, then you want something to be able to hold that dirt, because you don't want it to wash away. So I think fall is a really good time. Late fall is a really good time to do that, so you can start getting the roots and stuff established to hold the dirt in. Make sure when you're doing that you put hay or straw or something on top of it, some sort of barrier, because the water will rush off and take the seeds with it, take the dirt with it. But if you have something that will block, so you're going to have a patch of straw over it, but that'll block if it does rain. It'll sort of dissipate some of that energy that the rainwater has.
Okay, great. If nobody has any other questions, I think that will conclude our Sustainable Lawn Care webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We've been really happy to have you all. I will be sending out the recordings for each of the webinars tomorrow. Tomorrow or later today. And thank you all again. And please stay tuned. Check us out on Facebook and everything for more events coming up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.